That's amazing.
Good morning. Before we get into things, if you have not put your phone on airplane mode or turned it off, take a minute to do that so we have better bandwidth for the folks on Zoom. Thank you. And if you will open your green hymnals to number 53, Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. We'll open with that as our first song. Sondra has a sharing for us during this centering thought and reflection.
Good morning. This poem is either called A Cup of Christmas Tea or A Christmas Cup of Tea. The logs were in the fireplace, all spiced and set to burn. At last, the yearly Christmas race was in the clubhouse turn. All the cards were in the mail and gifts beneath the tree. And 30 days reprieve until Visa could catch up with me. And though smug satisfaction seemed the order of the day, something still was nagging me and would not go away. A week before, I got a letter from my old great aunt. It read, "Of course I'll understand completely if you can't, but if you find you have some time, how wonderful if we could have a little chat and share a cup of Christmas tea." She had a mild stroke that year, which crippled her left side. Though housebound now, My folks had said it hadn't hurt her pride. They said she'd love to see you, and what a wonderful thing it would be for you to go and maybe have a cup of Christmas tea. Boy, I didn't want to go. Oh, what a bitter pill to see an old relation and how far they'd gone downhill. I remember her as vigorous, as funny, and as bright. I remember Christmas Eves when she regaled us half the night. I didn't want to risk all that. I didn't want the pain. I didn't need to be depressed. I didn't need the strain. And what about my brother? Why not him? She's his aunt too. I thought I had it justified, but then before I knew all the reasons not to go I had so painstakingly built were crackling wide and crumbling in an acid rain of guilt. I put on boots, gloves, and cap, shame stinging every pore. Armed with squeegee, sand, and map, I went out my front door. I drove in from the suburbs to the newer part of town. The pastels of the newer homes gave way to grays and browns. I had this disembodied feeling as the car pulled up and stopped beside the wooden house that held the Christmas cup. How I got up to her door, I really couldn't tell. I watched my hand rise up and press the button of the bell. I waited, aided by my nervous rocking to and fro, and just when I was thinking I should turn around and go, I heard the rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall, the triple beat of 2 feet, and a crutch came down the hall. The clicking of the door latch and the sliding of the bolt and the little swollen struggle popped it open with a jolt. She stood there, pale and tiny, looking fragile as an egg. I forced myself from staring at the brace that held her leg. And though her thick bifocals seemed to crack and spread her eyes, their milky and refracted depths lit up with young surprise. Come in, she laughed the words and took me by the hand. And all my fears dissolved away as if by her command. We went inside, and before I knew how to react, before my eyes, my ears, my nose, was Christmas past, alive, intact. The scent of candied oranges, of cinnamon, of pine, the antique wooden soldiers in their military line. The porcelain nativity I had always loved so much. The Dresden and the crystal I'd been told I mustn't touch. My spirit fairly bolted like a child out of class and danced among the ornaments of calico and glass. Like magic, I was 6 again, deep in a Christmas spell, steeped in the million memories the child inside knew well. And there, among old Christmas cards, so lovingly displayed, a special place of honor for the ones we kids had made. And here, beside her rocking chair, the center of it all, my great aunt stood and said how nice it was I'd come to call. I started rattling on about the weather and the flu. She listened very patiently. Then she smiled and said, "What's new?" My words began to fly. I started making sense. I lost that phony breeziness I use when I get tense. She was still passionately interested in everything I did. She was patient, encouraging, just like when I was a kid. Now, simple generalities still sent her into fits. She demanded the specifics, the particulars, the bits. We talked about the limitations she had had to face. She spoke with candor, with humor and good grace. And then, defying the reality of crutch and straightened knee, on wings of hospitality, she flew to brew the tea. I sat alone with feelings I hadn't felt in years. I looked around at Christmas through a thick, hot blur of tears. The candles in the holly she'd arranged on every shelf, the impossibly good cookies she still somehow baked herself. But these rich and tactile memories became quite pale and thin when measured by the Christmas my great aunt kept deep within. Her body was halved and nearly spent, but my great aunt was whole. I saw a Christmas miracle, the triumph of a soul. The triple beat of 2 feet and a crutch came down the hall. The rattle of the china in the hutch against the wall. She poured 2 cups. She smiled, and then she handed one to me. And then we settled back and had a Christmas cup of tea.
I don't want to interrupt the spell. What a treat. Thank you, Sondra. Let's go on to community sharings. Lots of stuff always keeps happening in our lives, and this is an opportunity to share announcements to begin with, and we'll start with folks on Zoom.
Lisa, I do have a few openings still on the Family Promise Support Week, which is starting next Sunday. So if anyone can provide a meal for Tuesday, Wednesday, or Saturday, those slots were open at the time I looked yesterday. I haven't looked this morning. And there's also loaves of bread, bacon, sausage. There's some things for the resource center, but I want to remind everyone, since it starts next Sunday and that's Christmas Eve, if you're busy and can't get your items to the church before that Sunday, if you can't make it Sunday, you could drop it directly off to the resource center, which is at 238 Vine Street. But anyway, thank you, everyone. Have a good holiday if you can't make it next week.
Any other announcements from the folks on Zoom? All right, let's see what announcements we might have here in the meeting house.
Thanks, Jimmy. Anita Kamek, just a reminder that we'll have meeting for business today about noonish. I think everybody has a few moments to have a little bit of lunch, and then we'll reconvene here for the meeting. Thank you.
Hi, this is Sue Walton, and I'm the person with the checklist as to who is coming to dinner with the women's group at Graves Cafeteria in Mooresville. We need you to be there by 6 because and then we'll all go through the line together. They're going to save out seats for us. But so if you can start to arrive at like about 5:45 so that we can get in just about 6. I'm understanding that this is free pie day. Hey, so we will get a piece of pie. And it will be a first for Scott and I because we've never been to Grace, so it's going to be fun. So come join us. Anybody's welcome, but just sort of give me a call or an email. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Beth Simons. If anyone has anything for the January newsletter, I'd appreciate it coming in by the end of this week so I don't have to work on it over the holiday.
Oh God, we are grateful for this day. And we are grateful especially for the ties of friendship. To find in one another the joys of companionship, the presence of those who share our happiness and sustain us in our sorrows. Oh God, for this community, we are grateful. We pray, oh God, especially this time of year, for those who feel alone in this world. And we ask you to bring them to our attention, that we might be to them a friend and a comfort and a presence. We ask, O God, that we be rid of our tendencies to think only of ourselves, of our anxieties of having enough or not. And place within us, O God, satisfied spirits, appreciative of the gifts and graces that so mark and bless our lives. Prevent, O God, the self-pity which keeps us focused only on ourselves, and place within us a widening, deepening compassion for all your children, so that all people are to us as brothers, as sisters, as friends. To love deeply, to think creatively, to live joyfully, O God. This is our prayer. Amen. Well, now is the time we set aside to gather food for the hungry. So we invite some strong folks down to help with that. One of humanity's biggest problems is that people who think they're wonderful often aren't. And people who are wonderful seldom believe they are. It's nearly impossible to persuade a narcissist of his need to grow. And similarly, it's incredibly hard to convince someone with poor self-esteem of their worth and value. If self-perception were a globe, let's think of it as a globe, with narcissism on one pole and self-hatred on the other, we would say that living on the equator would be most healthy. Living on the equator between the poles of those extremes would enable us to acknowledge and celebrate our virtues and good qualities while also being aware of our faults and limitations. Life on the equator. We've been talking about depression, and you'll remember that we've said the place to start when you are depressed is to what? 3 words. See your doctor. See your doctor to discern if your depression has biological causes, which I ended up doing 2 weeks ago. I've been on an antidepressant for 10 years now, but in the past several months, my mood has just kind of gone down, and my depression, I could feel it just grow worse. So I did what I've been telling you to do and visited my doctor, who tweaked my medication, just a slight little adjustment. And now the sun is rising a bit higher in the sky. It was the Roman poet Horace who in 65 BC likened depression to a black dog following behind him. But some days I think a more fitting metaphor for depression might be a circling vulture, looping circles in the sky looking for its next weakened victim. Don't you be that victim. Get help. Get help. But once we've addressed the biological causes of depression, we have recognized also the importance then of cultivating certain habits and practices to elevate and enrich our lives. And today I want to add to that list is this. You have to like who you see in the mirror. You have to like who you see in the mirror. Not like Narcissus, the young man in Greek mythology who loved no one but himself and loved no one until he saw his own reflection in a pool of water, and then grieved because the reflection could not love him back, and then pined away until he died. When I say you have to like who you see in the mirror, I don't mean it that way. I mean you must respect the human being you are and are becoming, lest you descend into self-loathing and the vulture picks you off. I was up on the town square this past week. It was one of the nicer days this week, and got up into the mid-50s in Danville. And I thought, well, I'll just go for a little midday walk. And so I was up there, and I was walking down an alleyway that the town has spruced up with lights and tables and a mural painted on the brick wall. It all kind of looks vaguely Parisian right there in Danville. It's where all the juniors and seniors go to have their prom pictures taken by professional photographers. Very fancy now in Danville, and so different from when I was a kid, when your prom picture was taken by your mother using a Polaroid standing in your front yard. My mother always wanted to get the entire house in the picture and would stand back so that we were no bigger than little grains of rice. And she would say, "Looky there you are." But I remember the Polaroid camera. That was amazing to be able to hold a picture in your hands and not have to take it to the drugstore to be developed. And then by the time you got the picture back, you forgot who was in the picture altogether. What technology. I went to my senior prom, went to my junior prom, skipped my senior prom, and then the year after I graduated, so I was out of school, prom time rolled around again, and our phone rang. Now, kids, you will not believe this, but back when I was a kid, families had one phone that hung on a kitchen wall, and everyone in the family shared the same phone. And one day it rang, and it was a girl I knew who was very kind and sweet, but also very unattractive. And she was calling to see if I could take her to her high school senior prom. And being 19 and caring too much what others thought of me, I lied and told her I was busy the night of the prom, that I couldn't take her. She thanked me anyway and said goodbye, and we hung up. My father was seated at the kitchen table. He asked me who had called. I told him it was a girl asking me to her prom, but that I didn't want to go with her because she wasn't pretty. He said, I heard you tell her you had plans. What are your plans? I said, I don't know yet, but I'll find something. And Dad didn't say anything. He just looked at me with one of those parental looks that said, we raised you better than that. You know the look. Now, my father didn't do that often, but when he did, I knew I had screwed up. And I could not get this out of my mind. It kept coming back to me. And every time I thought about it and remembered what I had said and how I had lied to her, I felt terrible. And then I would feel angry at her for asking me to the prom instead of blaming myself for lying. But for the next week, whenever I thought about it, I just felt guilty. And so I phoned her. Kids, this was back in the old days, when once a year, someone who you never saw would leave a big, thick phone book on your front porch. And it had all the numbers of all the people you ever needed to call. It was very handy. You also used it at Thanksgiving for short people to sit on. That's how it was when I was a kid. So I looked up her phone number in that big, thick book, and I phoned her. And I told her my calendar had opened up and I could take her to the prom after all. And she was so excited, not realizing what a rat I was. But I knew a rat when I saw one, and I was a rat, a 5'11", 115-pound rat who should have been honored to go to the prom with anyone. The irony, as I look back on it, was that while I was worrying about her being unattractive, I was the one who was ugly. I was the one being ugly. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to feel good about anything, about life, about relationships, about anything, when you don't feel good about yourself. Central to our happiness is liking, respecting who we see in the mirror. You have to respect that person. And the only way to do that is to make sure the person you've become is worthy of respect. Self-esteem doesn't come cheap. It must be earned. And while it isn't healthy to perpetually not like yourself, not liking yourself in the right circumstances can be valuable. Sometimes self-loathing can be beneficial and even transformative. This is why we should pay attention to our feelings of self-loathing. When you don't like yourself, it might be because you have learned something about yourself that needs to change. Pay attention always to your feelings of self-loathing. So when I was pastoring in Irvington, we had a young man show up fresh out of college who'd gotten a job at a company in Indianapolis that designed and manufactured bombs. And the pay was really good. And he was happy having such a good job until one night he had a dream of children being killed by the bombs his company made. And he plunged into such a deep depression, such a state of self-loathing that he could barely function until he quit that job and found a job that didn't cause mothers and fathers to weep at the graves of their children. Friends, pay attention as a spiritual, moral, ethical practice. Pay attention to your feelings of self-loathing. When you don't like yourself, when you don't like life itself, it might be because you have learned something about yourself that needs to change. Face it squarely. Face it squarely and work always to be the best you can be.
As always, Phil's talks bring so many memories back, and brought back a memory of a prom to me when I was in high school. And I, of course, was very excited to go and had the right dress and everything. But I became ill and couldn't go. And my older sister, Madeline, was at IU. So she was above high school rigmarole and all that. She was very mature. But she is and was and is one of the sweetest, kindest, most thoughtful people on the face of the earth, and always was such a good example as an older sister doing the kind thing. And she came home from Bloomington and still had something to wear, I guess, and went to the prom with the fellow that she knew, of course. We were close enough that she had known him in high school too. And she stepped forward and did such a sweet, kind thing and enjoyed herself and made sure he had a good time. And I was thinking when Phil was talking to us that it's so important to have that role model. And we're so fortunate when we do. And it doesn't have to be someone in our family. It can be someone in our extended family here. And we're also fortunate to have so many good role models to help us see a lovely reflection in the mirror.
I was raised Catholic, and at a time when the church did a lot of emphasis on penance and recognizing sinfulness. So a bunch of us got real skilled at feeling guilt. And by the time I was in college, we were openly talking about that and trying to overcome it. Then I worked for 13 years in the prison system and got familiar with sociopathy, with folks who don't feel guilt. It's important that we feel guilt. It's a signal that there's something that needs fixing. And so it's not an evil, a wrong feeling in itself. It just needs to be correctly identified and dealt with. And I've heard, one of the things that came out of the anti-guilt movement among some of us Catholics was acting as though guilt in itself was a very bad thing. It's not. It's unpleasant, and there's a reason it's unpleasant. It's to try to get our attention so that we can rectify what it is we're doing wrong and become better selves. I'm going to invite you now to pick up your hymnal again, Worship and Song, and open it to 260. Here I am, Lord.
Sandy, I'm always surprised how our lives run parallel courses. My older brother Doug, was sick for his senior prom and said to his date, "Don't worry, my brother Phil will take you." And she said, "That's okay." But to go to the prom with Madeline would be a joy. She truly is one of the sweetest, kindest persons God ever put on the face of the earth. Friends, look for beauty in your life, but look in the right places and know what to look for. Sometimes the loveliest people are roughened husks outwardly, but inwardly are gentle and kind and wise. See in them the beauty that is within them, and endeavor, insofar it is possible, to be as beautiful as you are able, always, and to everyone. Amen. Turn and greet friends.